Let's start with your favorite player prop for today, Gare Bear.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dylan Carlson over 1.5 total bases at plus 140. We actually just got the Cardinals lineup, and he is, in fact, batting leadoff, as we thought he would for the duration of spring training. That could mean upwards of 5 plate appearances for Dylan Carlson, which would obviously help a volume-based prop like this one, but really it's his first 2 plate appearances that I'm concerned with, and those are probably going to come against JT Brubaker, who was just absolutely destroyed by left-handed bats to end 2021. His final 10 starts of the season, an 698 slugging percentage to opposing left-handed bats. Carlson, for his career, has tended to be better as a right-handed hitter than a left-handed hitter, but he still had an 800 slugging percentage and a 124 WRC plus batting left-handed at St. Louis last season. So I just think all the pieces come together here for him to go over 1.5 total bases.
All righty, Matty Ice, talk to me.
I'm going to make the same kind of pick as Garion, just from a different game. I like a volume-based prop, too. I'm going to go with over half a run for Kyle Tucker. And maybe this is just because it's still NBA season, and this is the way I think about NBA. So that's kind of why I'm making this selection. But we don't know where Kyle Tucker is going to bat in the Astros lineup yet. I think there's a good chance that he ends up batting second just based on things Dusty Baker has said and the way that the lineups came out in spring training. If Tucker is at the top of the order, then instead of having a low depth, like weaker hitter version of the Astros behind him at the end of the lineup, he'll have some of their best hitters behind him in the 3, 4, 5, and 6 spots. So that's really important news for Kyle Tucker props, specifically for runs, but also batting second would mean extra at bats. And then as far as the matchup, I think Shohei Ohtani is a good pitcher, maybe not quite as good as people think, but this is more about the lineup slot. And then also that Kyle Tucker has gotten better in each of his seasons in the major leagues. And I just think he's a really, really good hitter. So we're kind of buying low on him a little bit.
All right, Erik with a K, your favorite player prop for today.
Yeah, maybe all pitcher props are risky in their first time through the rotation, given we don't really know about their workloads. But I still like GT Brubaker to go over 4.5 strikeouts here against the Cardinals, mostly because you're getting plus 140 for it. He threw 3.2 innings in his final spring tune-up. I think that means he can get to 5 pretty comfortably here, and he struck out over a batter per inning last season. That's all he needs to do in 5 innings to hit the over 4.5 against the Cardinals lineup that is, I guess, fine, but not anything more than that. Brubaker had a 5.36 ERA last year, but some of the better ERA estimators had him right around 4. He's a fine pitcher, no business pitching on opening day for a good team, but he was a slightly above average strikeout guy, less walks than average as well. So he's a perfectly adequate pitcher who I think should be able to get 5 strikeouts in 5 innings here.
All right, which game is going over their run total, Matt? Highest run total on the slate, Brewers, Cubs, 9.5.
Ooh.
So I'm going to go back to the same game. And actually, that game is a little tricky because of the weather going on. We're starting the season with Wrigley weather. So I'm just going to stay away from that for now. And I'm going to go back to Astros Angels, where I think the pitching matchup is a little overvalued, which means I do like the over here at 8.5 runs. And part of it is that I think Ohtani is not quite as good of a pitcher as people think. I think the same is true for Framber Valdez, who I tend to like for DFS and for strikeout props, but in terms of run prevention, I don't think he's as good as maybe his ERA has been in the past. But then also at this time of year in April, it's cold in a lot of games, but that is not going to be true in Los Angeles, where it is pretty warm today and could be in the 80s during this game. So I think the total may just be underestimating how much the ball is going to travel. Maybe there's some rust for the pitchers because it is opening day. But the big factor for me is the weather, where like in Wrigley, we have cold weather. And in some of these other games, we have cold weather. In LA, I think that we could see the ball flying like it's the summertime because it is a hot day there.
All right, Erik, where are you going for this one?
Yeah, if we were talking over-unders in general, I would definitely say under in that Brewers-Cubs game, assuming the weather cooperates. How can we have a 9.5 in a game that has Corbin Burnes in it? That's beyond me. He's the best pitcher in the National League, maybe all of baseball. Last time he went to Wrigley Field, all he did was strike out 15 batters and tie the consecutive strikeout record. So that one, even though Kyle Hendricks isn't much at this stage in his career, no business being 9.5. If we strictly want an under or an over, I think over 7.5 in that Cleveland Kansas City game, even though Shane Bieber, I think, is going to do his part keeping it to the under. Zach Greinke at this stage of his career, I don't think he has much business pitching in a game that has that line set at 7.5. His strikeout rate plummeted last season, dropped from 24.5 all the way to 17.2% last year. I don't think there's much left in his arm. I don't think he's close to an opening day quality starter. I think it should be pretty easy for that total to get to 8, even with Shane Bieber on the other side.
All right, Gary, and yeah, that Cleveland KC game has a total of 7.5. The next lowest is the Pirates and Cardinals at 8.
Yeah, but if we're talking overs here, I think I do like the over in the Mets-Nationals game. Again, East Coast weather, not super appealing to the over. I understand that, although this seems like it is one of the better weather spots on the East Coast starting this off. This game, I believe, is now actually up to 9.5, or it's been moving, kind of fluctuating between 9 and 9.5 this throughout the morning. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this pitching matchup is kind of sneaky terrible. I mean, Patrick Corbin, among the 39 qualified pitchers last season, had the highest ERA and highest FIP in baseball. I mean, his starting this game for the Nationals is really just out of, sheer, I don't know, like desperation, embarrassment. I don't know what you want to call it at this point. And then Taylor Mcgill, I like Taylor Mcgill in terms of his season-long projections, but I do think people have this image of Mcgill coming up for the Mets, sort of coming out of nowhere and being a dominant force, which he was for his first 9 or 10 starts. But his last 7 starts of the season, he had a 6.56 FIP, and he was giving up more than 3.2 home runs per 9. So I think the league started to figure him out a little bit his second time through. So I don't really trust either of these guys to keep the ball in the ballpark. So I think this does go over in Washington.
All right, let's talk about favorite run line or money line bet, Erik.
Yeah, you're not going to get a great payout for this one, but at minus 180, I think you're actually getting a pretty good deal on Atlanta over Cincinnati here. The Reds have just been emptied out over the winter. There is not all that much left there. Nick Castellanos gone in free agency. Jesse Winker, Eugenio Suarez traded from that lineup, although maybe Suarez isn't the biggest loss there. Sonny Gray, too, on the pitching side. Even minor losses, Tucker Barnhart, Amir Garrett, Wade Miley. The team is just lost, a third of the active roster and many of the best players on that roster. And they're going up against the reigning champs here. I don't think anybody necessarily thinks the Braves are clearly the top team in baseball, but they're, in that top tier or tier 1B going up against a team that isn't going to do much. Tyler Mahle for the Reds is, one of the best remaining Reds. He's a good pitcher, maybe not opening day starter for too many teams. High 3s ERA kind of guy, but he is worse, I think, than Max Fried, who had a 3.04 ERA, which was maybe better than the ERA estimators, but not by a ton. He's not much of a strikeout guy, but he doesn't walk anybody, and he keeps the ball on the ground well. I think he's got a pretty decent advantage over Mahle, and the lineup is quite a big advantage as well. I think this could easily be minus 200 or more in Atlanta's favor.
Gary, what's your favorite run line or money line bet?
Yeah, I think I'll just take the Guardians minus 125. Sort of to Eric's point earlier, I think the name value of Zach Greinke is maybe getting a little too much respect in this particular spot. I think this is one of those games that if we see a similar pitching matchup or this exact pitching matchup in like June, the Guardians are going to be minus 200 favorites. I'm just out on Zach Greinke this season. I think he's cooked. The strikeout rate plummeted last season. Maybe there aren't like a huge amount of like great right-handed bats in this Cleveland lineup, which is really what gave Greinke issue last season. But I do just think that the pitching matchup is so heavily sided towards Cleveland. And while I do think the Royals lineup is better than people are giving it credit for, like I said, I think this should probably be minus 160, minus 170. Maybe even just take a look at the first 5. It's minus 135 for the Guardians if you're really just in on this because of the starting pitching matchup.
All right, Maddie.
Well, I'll break the tie between Erik and Garion on JT Brubaker. Let's just talk about him again. And I'll take the Pirates plus 155. Unfortunately, this line was higher last night, so it has come down a bit. But I still think there's a little bit of value left. And the key point for Brubaker, yes, he's pretty bad against lefties, but this Cardinals lineup today has 7 right-handed hitters and 2 switch hitters, so functionally 2 lefties. He's getting a predominantly right-handed lineup, which is really good for him. And then on the other side, Adam Wainwright is 40 years old, and he burned me so many times over the past couple of years, just exceeding expectations in spots where I thought he wasn't going to be that great. But now he's 40, and this has to be, it just has to be at least a little bit of regression for him in terms of how he pitches this year. And then the Cardinals offense, I just don't think is that great anyway. So all of this adds up to me. Yes, the Cardinals are the better team. They probably have the better pitcher on the mound, but the margins are much closer than the odds are giving it credit for. So I think the Pirates do have a real shot in this game.